안녕하십니까. 오늘은 2021년 6월 27일 일요일 아침입니다. 그리고 지금 여기는 아이다호주 옐로스톤 공원 가까이 있는 아일랜드 파크라는 곳입니다. 한국을 사랑하는 사람들 두 번째 시간으로 오늘은 데럴 해리스 전 서울 선교부장님을 찾아뵙고 그분의 한국 사랑과 경험을 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 부장님 안녕하십니까?
안녕하세요.
반갑습니다.
좋은 아침입니다.
좋은 아침입니다.
Yeah.
여기가 어디죠? Where are we?
Island Park, Idaho, near the Montana border and very near Yellowstone Park, 30 miles from Yellowstone Park.
그렇습니다. 여기서 옐로스톤 공원까지 30마일 떨어졌는데 오늘 우리 해리스 부장님하고 이 얘기는 영어와 한국어로 섞어가면서 얘기하도록 하겠습니다. 오케이, 질문하겠습니다. 준비되어 있습니까? 네. 제가 여기 자리를 좀 옮길게요.
Yeah.
Alright. So, 언제 한국으로 가셨습니까?
I arrived in Korea on my first mission in July 1961. Actually, remember back then, Korea and Japan were all in one mission called the Northern Far East Mission.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is I went to President Andrus's office the next morning after I arrived in Tokyo, and I had an interview, and he assigned me to Korea. And up till then, I had no idea that Korea was part of the Northern Far East Mission, so that was a surprise to me. So I had to wait in Tokyo for 2 weeks for a visa to go to Korea and did missionary work. Then I flew to Korea, and when I saw Korea and saw the farming country, I saw little children, I knew I was in the right place because sometime before my mission call, I had these things come into my mind. I saw little children, little brown-skinned children, some of them without clothing, just playing with their out in front of their houses or somewhere. And when I got to Korea, I saw that because it was right after the war, and I knew I was in the right place.
So when you first got your call to Korea, where did you live at that time?
I lived in Idaho.
Where in Idaho?
In McCammon, Idaho, Aramo, Idaho. It's called Marsh Valley area. So my family lived in McCammon until I was 15, and then Aramo, just 4 miles away. So, and then I went 2 years of college at Idaho State University, and then left for my mission.
So the day you went to the Korea, like you started from McCommon, right?
Yeah.
Who drove you to the airport? Did you drive to Salt Lake City Airport or?
Well, I went to the Salt Lake City for 1 week in that mission home, MTC, Missionary Training Center. It was not in Provo then, it was in Salt Lake City. There was no language training. And so we just heard talks from the members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, the president of the church, for 1 week. And then we boarded the airplane, flew to Hawaii, flew to Tokyo, waited there 2 weeks, and then flew to Kimpo Airport.
So, did you know anything about Korea when you
No.
got the call to Korea?
No, when I opened my mission call, it said Northern Far East Mission, headquarters in Tokyo, Japan, so I thought Japan.
You would go to Japan, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was happy when I got into Korea because it fit my mind of where I belonged.
So, how was your Korean learning process?
So back then, again, we had no language training in the missionary training center. We just learned on the go, and so we learned from our senior companion. We learned from Korean members. Everyone would help. We had one little simple language book put together by missionaries, and that helped. And when I would go out on the street, my companions would teach me a basic introductory how to greet people, and so it just a little bit here, a little bit there, and Korea is a very difficult language for Americans to use. The current missionary training center rates Korean as the third most difficult language to learn for English-speaking people. The most difficult is Finnish. Second is an Indian language, Navajo, and third is Korean.
Wow. So, do you remember who was your best Korean trainer?
Well, for 1 month, I was a companion to Elder Waddell, who was mission president in Daejeon.
And he passed away, right?
Yes, he passed away.
He was a rancher, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, when I knew him early in his life after our missions, he was living in Driggs, Idaho, and he ran a dairy. So he milked cows, and he was a very, very good individual. And then my second companion was Elder Donald Hill from California. And at that time, I was living at Samcheong-dong.
Any Korean members you remember at that time?
Hong Byung-shik. Yeah, he was the branch president. I remember him very well. I've got in my journal written down a lot of things, and I just recently did our family history, and this is 365 pages, about 1,000 pictures in it, and I completed it in December and gave it to my grandchildren for Christmas. But in here is a big section about my first mission in 1961. And on this page, for example, my first impressions of Korea. And on the first page, back here is a page entitled My Mission to Korea. And
that's the day you left home, yeah?
Yeah, that's my mother and father taking me to the airport.
Wow.
And my suitcase is in my hand.
Uh-huh.
And back then we had to wear hats,
Hat.
so missionary hat.
Was that part of the missionary uniform?
Yeah. And so there's a picture of me and all the missionaries at the MTC in 1961. And then back here in 1997, I'll show you pictures and pages of when we arrived in Korea in 1997 with my wife.
Well, that's the when you arrived, when you went back to Korea as a mission president.
Yes.
All right. So we'll talk about that later. Okay. The
Okay.
first part we'll focus on your first trip to Korea.
All right.
So, how did the Korean people receive you when you first went to Korea, 1961?
Very well, because we would go out street contacting, and Koreans were very curious about Americans. And especially if we went up on the street, we were street contacting, and we would grab their hand and shake it and speak to them in Korean. It was very surprising for them. And they said, who is this American who knows how to speak Korean? So back then, missionary work was very successful. Samcheong-dong had a baptismal font in it. And I can remember going there and baptizing. We had baptisms every Saturday. So sometimes baptized 3 people, sometimes on a Saturday 4 people. One Saturday I remember I baptized 7 young men that we street contacted. So if Korea was a separate mission back then, we would have been in the top of the church in terms of convert baptisms. So the Korean people were very gracious, very interesting, and curious, and it was fun doing missionary work.
Any Korean members you baptized or you taught, you still stay in touch with them? Any?
Yeah, remember Brother Yu, who was the driver for President Carr when he came to Korea in 1962. baptized him, but he's passed away. But I stayed in touch with his wife,
His wife, I see.
and she may have been passed on by now.
And also, I remember you telling me that you used to stay in touch with the cook, the mission home cook.
Yeah, Sister E.
Sister E.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the highlight of your 2-year mission in Korea? If you just mention maybe one or two.
In my first mission,
The first mission.
well, when 1 year later, the church created the Korean mission and sent over our mission president, Gail E. Carr from California. And right away, he called me into the mission office to be his personal secretary and mission recorder. And so I got to know him really well and spent most of the rest of my mission, 1.5 years, working with him. I started out as recorder and secretary, and then I was his second counselor and then his first counselor. So we had a lot of fun experiences. I was working with him when we purchased the Cheongwon-dong property where the mission headquarters were moved from Samcheong-dong. I was there when the first chapel in Korea the property was purchased and built, and a man by the name of Kenneth Roos was a church missionary builder, and I remember him coming up over to Korea from Idaho and constructed the first chapel. So there was a lot of interesting things in the history of the church in Korea that I got to be part of because I worked with President Carr.
Yes, I remember the picture. Maybe you have that picture in your book. You were at the groundbreaking ceremony of that chapel, Yongdu in Dongdaemun area.
Yeah, Dongdaemun area.
Yeah.
So I can find that picture.
Right. That was quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
That's
1962. Is that right?
Probably 62 or 63.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was the groundbreaking ceremony for it. And then that chapel is still in use.
Still in use, but the Samcheong has been already sold,
Yeah.
and Cheongwon
Yep.
already been sold, or maybe almost to be sold because the President Taylor will be the last mission president who will be using that building, and
They contacted me to send
submit the story or pictures like that.
to put my memories in about that, and because they said that's going to be sold, and
Right.
so it's sad, but it's progress.
Yes, a lot of church properties in Korea either being sold or maybe sold a long time ago.
Yeah, the Cheongwon-dong property was right near the presidential palace, so it's very, very valuable property, and so I think it's wise for the church to sell it and do something else because it's just the thing to do, I guess.
네, 감사합니다. 그리고 2부에서는 우리가 우리 해리스 부장님이 한국에 두 번째로 선교 부장님으로 가셔서 봉사하실 때 얘기를 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
Yeah.
말씀 감사합니다.
Yeah, thank you.